Today, I want to talk about a hiring mistake that I think silently drains companies of time, money, and momentum. And this happens probably more often than most companies and leaders realize. Over the years, 10 years recruiting, and in the past being a candidate myself, I often speak with candidates that will share something along the lines of the same story. They'll share that they took a role that they didn't really want, or that they kept moving forward in the interview process, even though something was telling them it wasn't quite a fit. Maybe they went all the way to final rounds and then they declined the offer. And in some cases, in a lot of cases, actually, the candidate is transparent. They'll let the recruiter know, they'll let the hiring manager know what they're looking for and that they're not sure that this aligns. But they'll be encouraged to move forward in the process anyway. And if the candidate had been really listening to themselves in these situations, they could have ultimately saved themselves a lot of time, rather than shifting their focus to what they did prioritize, a role, another opportunity, or their current role, rather than spending time focused on an interview process where the role doesn't align. But also the leadership team interviewing the candidate could have saved themselves a tremendous amount of time as well. And it's not just about the impact to the candidate's time, it's about the impact on leaders, on the hiring timeline, and the company's overall momentum. And just thinking back, I work for myself now for a while, but when I've been in interviews before, I can think of a lot of times where I've never even once been asked what my goals are. What direction am I looking to go? What are my long-term goals? What am I looking for? What's important to me in an opportunity? And this amazes me, and it highlights the core challenge in the issue that I'm bringing attention to today, and that is that the focus in these situations is on filling the role. More about filling the role and not about assessing alignment. So, of course, we being the recruiter, the hiring manager, the company, can assess for whether or not the candidate fits with what we are looking for. But are we thinking about what the candidate is looking for and whether the role is in alignment with what they want? Because when we shift our focus away from what the candidate wants, we can end up pushing candidates forward, even when they're signaling hesitation. And this is where it's really important to pay attention to when that hesitation is coming up, to stay really present in the interview process, both as a candidate and also as a hiring manager. You want to pay attention to what it is the candidate wants and listen to that intuition. Stay very present, listen to your instinct when you feel a pause there, when you feel a hesitation. Well, it sounds like, or I'm not sure that the opportunity is exactly what this candidate is looking for, but maybe we can push them along, bring them on board, and maybe we'll have something for them down the line that is what they're looking for. This often results in turnover. It often backfires. A lot of times, and this is very natural. It even happened to me last week where and it's still bugging me. And even though I speak on, I coach on, and I teach intuition and really listening to and yourself and staying present when you have that pause, when you have that hesitation, it can be a challenging thing to do in the moment, especially when we're experiencing stress, as you often likely are as a leader, being pulled in many different directions, but just in life as well. Sometimes we have a pause, and for me, it'll take me a moment sometimes to process my thoughts and my feelings and then articulate it. And we don't always get that time right in the moment. But in the hiring process, you can take that time. Even if you haven't figured out exactly, if you haven't identified the pause, or the emotion, but you have a feeling of resistance, note it. Because when we ignore this and we move a candidate along in the process, then this is where the process gets messier and it gets more expensive. And I see this a lot where the candidate looks great on paper, and yes, they fit the culture. The candidate has what the company wants, what the leader wants. They interview well, but what they want, what the candidate goals are, maybe their lifestyle needs, their long-term vision and focus, doesn't match the specific opportunity that you are hiring for. And so if that misalignment is ignored and you move them forward in the process anyway, maybe even to final rounds, then they decline the offer. I see this happen a lot, and the leadership team will be surprised, disappointed and surprised, and a lot of times I'm not surprised because the candidate let us know, what they were looking for. And so we really want to pay attention to that, because if a role is not a fit at the start of the conversation, that first interview, it's still not going to be a fit. Even if the candidate steps into the role in 6 months or a year, they may be looking. And we often talk about, candidates trying to fit themselves inside the box of what the hiring manager wants rather than just showing up authentically, being themselves and being transparent about their experience and what they're looking for. Well, I see this happen a lot on the from the other side as well, where the company tries to become the box that the candidate wants, and that's never going to work out well. Misalignment is always going to reveal itself. Who we are, what we want, is always going to end up showing up. And the point that I want to make here in this video is that if we pay attention and heed our instincts and those pauses that we have early on, and really keep the focus on the candidate and what they want, we can save so much time and even money in the process as well. So let's talk about that a little bit, the real-time cost actually of each interview. And I believe that companies are likely drastically underestimating the total bandwidth that the interviewer, the leadership team, is actually putting into each interview. So if you have a 30-minute initial phone interview, for example, or maybe have a 1-hour Zoom interview, this is the actual interview time is not the interview takes up a lot more time than the actual interview. And here's why. The leader is going to take some time preparing for the interview beforehand. They're going to then shift their focus to get focused away from one task to get focused on the interview. Then they're going to do the actual interview. They've got to enter their notes likely into the company applicant tracking system. They're going to debrief. They're going to coordinate with other interviewers internally, and then they have to regain their focus afterwards. So all of this takes time. All of these distractions add up and end up adding on much more time than is actually allotted for just the interview. So for a 30-minute interview, for a 1-hour interview, that could end up taking 2.5 hours total just for that one interview, with all of those additional steps and distractions that I just mentioned there. And that's keeping it very, very simple. There could be even greater distractions and resulting in more time than what I shared there. But let's talk about the financial impact to organizations, and this is where I don't know that organizations are spending much time focusing on. So I think it's important to bring awareness here. So let's say that let's calculate the hourly rate of a leader. Let's say if they're making around $100 an hour, and this would be conservatively speaking. If you break down their base salary plus commission, and maybe they're working 60 to 70 hours per week, maybe they're making around $100 per hour. And then if each interview is taking 2.5 hours of leadership time, what does this actually cost? Usually, of course, you're going to have more than once. Maybe you're going to have 5 or 6 interview rounds, maybe even more than that, but we're just going to keep it very simple and conservative. So if you're taking 2.5 hours times $100 hourly rate, then that's $250, of course. And then if you take one candidate, this is just one candidate through 5 rounds of interviews, and likely you're going to have many more than just one candidate. Well, 5 rounds of interviews at $250 an hour. And this is hourly rate, not focused on leadership time, but just focused on the interview process. Well, that's $1,250. Okay, so that doesn't sound so bad. And this is very conservatively speaking, but what if the numbers are greater than that as far as hourly rate, more than 5 rounds of interviews, and when you have multiple leaders participating, and with a misaligned candidate? And then you likely are working for an organization that has multiple teams and multiple divisions. So what if this happens maybe 20 times throughout the course of the year, where you're spending 2.5 hours for one step in the interview process, for one candidate that's misaligned, and so they're not the right candidate. There are signs early on, but you keep moving them forward, and you end up moving that candidate through 5 rounds. Well, if you do this mistake, I'm going to call it a mistake, 20 times, this could end up costing the company $25,000. And again, this is very conservatively speaking. And if you're like me, you probably super value your time. And so this is just thinking about the dollar cost, but the time value there as well, pulling your leadership away from their leadership duties when we're interviewing a candidate, moving them through the process that is they're misaligned because the opportunity is not exactly what they're looking for. And again, this is conservatively speaking. These numbers, time and money, are not even taking into consideration the opportunity cost losses when you have the stalled searches, when you lose momentum, because if you're moving a candidate that's not the right candidate to the final round of interviews, you're likely stopping your search or instructing your recruiter, hey, we've got a final candidate. And so then you stop the search and then you've lost that momentum and then you have to start the process over again. So the leader has to regain their momentum. The recruiting team has to regain their momentum. And this is how just one small misalignment can lead to really significant organizational losses. And the thing is, though, why do we do this? Why do we move the candidate that is misaligned forward to final stages in the interview, or even to the second or third interview in the process when there are signs that it's misaligned, not the right fit? Because we want to fill the role, we want to speed up the process. But what happens then is we actually slow down the process for all the reasons that I just shared there, and then you're starting the process over. So what can you do to avoid this mishap and save your leaders time and save your organization money in the hiring process? You can keep your focus on what the candidate actually wants. And as a recruiter, I'm always asking this question of any candidate that I talk with. I want to understand, what does the candidate actually want? What is important to them in their next opportunity? And so I always start my conversations with candidates with this question. I want to learn about them and what they want, because if I learn in the first 5 minutes that what they want is not a fit with the opportunity, then I've just saved myself 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes from talking about sharing with them the details of the role and then working to better qualify and see if they're a fit, when I could have taken, or in the first 1 to 3 to 5 minutes, you can learn whether or not they are a fit. So that's the role of the recruiter before they present the candidate to you. But sometimes recruiters are missing this step as well, and they're encouraging candidates to just go ahead and have a conversation. But this is where that domino effect of time wastage and money wastage starts there, and it could stop in that first initial conversation. And just this one shift in the interview process is going to help protect leadership time and team bandwidth and hiring momentum, and also company budget. And so this, having clear, effective communication, is going to save time in the hiring process and ultimately save money. So what can you do? What takeaways can you implement today in your hiring process? You can start asking or educate your internal recruiters, have a conversation with your external recruiters that you partner closely with, make sure that they're asking these key questions. Ask the candidate about their long-term goals in the first conversation and listen for any hesitation that they have. Doesn't have mean that you have to necessarily pass on that candidate right away, but you want to note that pause, you want to note that hesitation, and you want to dig deeper there. You want to ask additional questions, and you want to assess alignment from the candidate perspective before assessing qualifications, because then you can save time and energy if you learn that the opportunity is not a fit with what the candidate actually wants. And this way, you can give candidates that are not aligned with the opportunity, or the opportunity is not aligned with what they want, give them back their time, and give yourself and your leadership team back time as well. And then this way you can still keep that candidate in mind for future opportunities that may be a better fit. But otherwise you could be, and I see this so much, so this is why I wanted to hop on and do a video about it, because I want to help leaders and teams save time, save money, and ultimately make the right hires with less stress and faster. And when we waste our time, when our time is not invested well, this is just another distraction that's going to shift focus away from your current role. So this misalignment, moving candidates forward in the process who are not aligned with the role, with what the role's not aligned with what they're looking for, it's expensive. And effective communication, getting that clarity up front, establishing that connection to gain an understanding of what it is that the candidate really wants. If you do that early on in the process, you're going to end up saving so much time and saving your company money, and that's more time that you can have to focus on your other leadership duties. And so yeah, just wanted to share. I hope that was helpful. I do think it's something that, with all of the other distractions and priorities in leadership, that we're not often thinking about the true cost of moving forward with a candidate that's not actually a fit, or when we don't have the right fit for the candidate. But through strengthening communication, you can avoid misalignment, you can improve decision making, and ultimately create hiring processes that are faster and clearer and far less stressful. And this is what I help organizations do. My name's Amy Miller, and I help hiring managers make lasting hires with less stress. And if you're interested in learning more about my coaching and or workshops, the links are in the description. And if you got some value, remember to like and subscribe. I will see you in the next one.